Welcome into the new USFL show from a betting angle. This is WagerTalk YouTube. I am Drew Martin, joined here by three astute USFL handicappers and Adam Trigger, Rob Veno, Tony Mejia from WagerTalk.com. Guys, we're getting you ready for this upcoming season for week one. You know, this is a video we want you to be able to kind of come back, check in, on the rules changes to help you get set up for betting the USFL, because we do have a lot of changes from, let's just say, the NFL rules here, which we will get into on the video. But going around the horn, kind of welcoming everybody in. Adam Trigger at Top Flight SI on Twitter, WagerTalk.com. Trig, welcome in, man. How you feeling about the USFL?
Oh, thanks, Drew. I feel great about it. I mean, I don't know if any of us are USFL experts yet, but we've all been betting spring football for years. Most recently, we had XFL, we had AAF. This is just another iteration of that. So the books know next to nothing about this stuff, and it's there's a lot of value out there if you dig for it. And that's what I plan to do, and I'm sure the other guys do as well. So I can't wait for these games to start on Saturday. Look forward to the season.
Absolutely. I'm excited too, man. We got Saturday night, the first game, New Jersey Generals, Birmingham Stallions. And then we got 3 games on Sunday for week 1 USFL. And guys, we were joking before the video started here. Rob Veno, WagerTalk.com. He was a guy around betting the first USFL in 1983, Rob? So what are your thoughts there on betting the first time around compared to this time? Welcome in, man.
Good to be back with you, Drew, Tony, and Adam as well. Yeah, it's two different entities, right? When the original USFL was in action, there were star players in that league, and they were, in the end, they lost that league because they attempted to go head to head with the NFL, but they did have money. They had a ABC television contract at the time, and star players like Steve Young and Herschel Walker and Sam Mills. You go up and down the line. Jim Kelly, the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, was the original quarterback of the Houston Gamblers. Lots of NFL players once that league disbanded. So it was different to bet on because you had a real good grip of the personnel. Here, like Adam said, there's a little digging to do. A lot of these guys have been to the NFL, had a cup of coffee, either with the actual teams in preseason, on a practice squad. And this is their opportunity to try and make it back. Hopefully, Drew, this one sticks. I know you and I have been through a couple of years, 19 and 20, the COVID year, where we got the AAF and got the XFL and did a couple of videos, only to watch those leagues fold. But there's never enough football, so I'm looking forward to it as well as you guys are.
Absolutely. In the offseason of the NFL and college football, I think it's good to have a new league in here with some new rules, which changes as sports bettors is what we're looking for. It's kind of a way to get an angle over the sports books, a guy that knows a little bit about that, maybe a lot about that. Tony Mejia, he's WagerTalk.com as well. Tony, welcome in, man. What are your thoughts here? Opening thoughts on the USFL.
Hey, Drew. Hey, guys. Looking forward to seeing some 3-point conversions. That'll be fun. I was a 5-year-old Gamblers fan back when the USFL was first around, because I've always been pro Gambler. Hated everything about New Jersey, so I'm sure I hated them. I don't remember back that far, but looking forward to this new league and getting going, and hopefully it'll be interesting, because you could probably fool some foreigners or somebody that knows nothing about sports and saying this is the biggest sporting event of all time. Look at it; it's on 2 national networks to tip things off on Saturday night. So here you go. You can't escape it. Hopefully they give us a good product right out of the gate.
Sure. And guys, some interesting notes here about the new USFL. I mean, compared to the old USFL, there are some big names in there. Mark Levy, former president here, Donald Trump involved in that one. And sure enough, to Tony's point, I mean, they had some big names back then, Jim Kelly, and a bunch going to play in the USFL. Of course, it folded. Now bringing it back here, we got some big names. They are throwing some money in here, and they're also saving costs. So a couple things to kind of keep in mind. All the games are going to be in Birmingham, one at Legion Field, the other at the new where UAB, the Blazers, play their home games. So in terms of saving on travel costs, also home field advantage, how much is that going to factor in? There is a Birmingham team here as well as the two champions of the first USFL, Michigan Panthers and the Philadelphia Stars. We'll get into all the teams and the games for week one quickly at the end. But overall, in terms of the rules changes, there are key rules changes here at the top there. The overtime, it's more like the college overtime. I guess they're calling it a shotgun out the gate, which each team will get 2 points for scoring. They'll go up sudden death after 3 attempts. After 3 attempts, whoever has more points will win the game. And then if they're tied, they'll go into sudden death. We get the double forward pass there. Now, both passes have to be, made behind the line of scrimmage, but it's interesting. Double forward pass is going to be allowed. That might be part of guys handicapping both sides and totals. The timing. Now, this is important mainly for totals, but also particularly early in the season when offenses tend to be behind defenses. This is huge here. Last 2 minutes of the before halftime and before the end of the game, the clock will stop on first down. So it's more like college instead of the NFL. I think that will help out, quarterbacks, really just receivers in general, move the ball down the field. And point after attempts, Tony touched on this a little bit. You get the 1 point for kicking it, normally like an NFL kick from the 15-yard line. You can go for 2 from the 2-yard line. And here's where it gets interesting. You can go from 3 for 3 from the 10-yard line. And they're doing a little marketing push here, the USFL, saying, hey, if it's an 18-point game, that's only 2 possessions. So late in the game, it is still kind of alive here. So in terms of rules changes, guys, because, as sports bettors talking about change, it can be a way to get an edge on the books. Tony, what are your overall thoughts here, man? Just coming out of the gate week one, how do you think this is going to affect your handicap most, Tony?
Well, look, we have to see how week one unfolds and how, a lot of these coaches use the strategy of it. But you touched upon it. If it's a 2-possession game because of 3-point conversions, then obviously it'll be coached up that way because teams will want to win late third, fourth quarter. It'll be interesting to see how they feel each other out early. And week one is going to be the guinea pig week. It saves on time looking at weather reports that all these games are going to be at Birmingham. And there's a situation where this weekend it's supposed to be rainy, but the only game that may be truly affected by weather will be the late Sunday night one because there are supposed to be thunderstorms in the area. So again, we'll have to get adjusted to all the niches in terms of this league, but it's like every other league. You'll find teams you like and angles that you want to adopt and try to capitalize on.
Rob, coming into the rules changes and seeing the clock stopping at the end of the first half and the end of the game, my first initial thought in the market is seeing this, a huge push towards the unders, mainly due to the other new league that folded, the XFL, just a couple years ago. The first, 3 weeks, it was a huge under trend. If you were betting unders, you were making a ton of money. And we've seen the early money, quote unquote, smart money be on the unders. But that rule change, actually, that might help overs a little bit more. However, if the offense can't move the ball, it's not going to matter. But interested in your thoughts overall on the rules changes, how it affects your handicapping, Rob.
Well, where that stuff is concerned, Drew, I think the first thing we learned from the AAF in 2019 and the XFL in 2020 were in those 2 leagues, Drew, I believe you were not allowed to place kick an extra point. You either had to go for your extra points came on actual plays, not kicks. Here, they do give you the option to kick for 1 point and then go for 2 or go for 3. But I think what I learned there is key numbers go out the window in these leagues. It's not like NFL or college football where 3, 7, 14. And when you're talking about totals, when you get into the 40s, you can forget about 41, 42, 44, 47, 48, those key numbers that you're betting totals on in normal football. Those all go out the window. At least they did with the AAF and XFL. I would imagine, at least I'm going to treat this as the same. So it's going to be very hard to find sort of a line in the sand that you want to draw where totals are concerned. I think that in those leagues, Drew, most of those numbers where totals are concerned were either high 30s, but not many in the mid 40s like we're seeing here now. So these may still be a little bit high. talked about that a little bit off there. I think another interesting one is the onside kick, right? You can do a regular onside kick, or you can have the ball spotted at the 33-yard line, and it automatically becomes 4th and 12. If you convert that 4th and 12, the ball's yours and you move on. So how many teams will choose to do that rather than the traditional onside kick? So much going on here. But like I say, a lot of the regular stuff we used as key numbers, and again, we're always, we're betting games, but we're betting against numbers here. A lot of that stuff goes out the window with these alternate leagues.
Yeah, good points there, Rob. And also, there's some other minor rules changes that we didn't put on graphic. Like, to Rob's point, the kickoffs, they're from the 25-yard line in the USFL. Also, all the players on the kickoff team must line up 1 yard from where the ball is placed. And interestingly, the eight players on the receiving team must be in the setup zone between their own 35 and 45. So after a kickoff travels 20 yards, the first touch must be made by the receiving team. Just some interesting quirks there that right out the gate, I don't know. I really don't know how that's going to affect kickoffs that much. But of course, if there is change of possession, it's obviously going to affect the outcome of each game. Trig, interested in your thoughts. What are you thinking of these rules overall? Are you a fan of them, and how is it going to affect your handicapping?
I'm okay with them. I don't know if I'm a fan of any yet. I have to see how they actually play out to decide if I'm a fan of the rule changes. But I will say this. So overall handicap, the rules are not going to play a huge part in my overall handicap. But what I do think is like the outlets that are offering USFL betting, which there are plenty of them, and that's a big sort of proponent of the league is being interactive, having a social media presence, and they're going to be offered at books that are going to put up like in-game betting and props and stuff like that. That 4th and 12 rule, like to me, converting 4th and 12 much easier than recovering an onside kick. I mean, I feel like every time I need to close out a football game, I get a 4th and 12 converted on me. So it's just, to me, like if you might be able to pick off like a big in-game price, if you know that, okay, maybe you're down 20 points, but touchdown, convert 4th and 12, all of a sudden you have the ball back. I mean, you might see some big time momentum swings in games where it's like couple touchdown lead. Now all of a sudden it's a close game. I think that's what the league wants a little bit with some of these rules. It definitely end of the first half, that rule of the clock stopping on first downs is definitely a proponent of keeping the offense with a chance. They're going to want comebacks, excitement, because that's going to keep people interested in the league. So, the rule changes are what they are. Not going to affect my handicap of like team versus team so much, at least not early on. If we see some coaches utilizing the rules better than others, then that's obviously something they could take into consideration. But there might be some wrinkles that the books can't quantify, like in game, where if you're just, if you're watching the game, you might be able to have a significant advantage on the way the in-game prices move relative to the rules, because whatever the algorithm is or however they price in-game is just not sort of up to speed on the rules being what they are.
Good points. It will also be interesting if the sports books are kind of going full force with the in-game live betting, because, hey, week one, they don't really know what they're getting into either. So that will be something to watch here as what Fox Bet opened it, huge movement in the totals. And now we're seeing DraftKings up. Guys, check out WagerTalk odds screen to kind of compare the lines here across sports books, because, hey, it is a more of an inefficient marketplace. As a sports bettor, sometimes we think like NFL, it is king in terms of handle, but it's also a very efficient marketplace. So a lot of times it's hard to beat the NFL. Here in this new league, there aren't as many eyeballs. There's going to be more inefficiencies. It actually might be better to bet, better to get an advantage over the sports books. That's the way I'm looking at it anyway. As we segue here from the rules, and feel free to touch back on them. But Robbie, coming to you here first, in terms of the teams and the coaches, I'll run them over real quick. We got Michigan Panthers, Philadelphia Stars. Those were the two winners of the USFL back in the 80s. We also got the Birmingham Stallions, of course, the home team. We'll see how much of a home field advantage they actually have. New Jersey Generals, Michigan Panthers, like we mentioned, Houston Gamblers, kind of like that team name there in the Gamblers, New Orleans Breakers, Tampa Bay Bandits, Pittsburgh Maulers, all playing there at the two stadiums in Birmingham. And Robbie, some of the coaches' names kind of caught my eye here. There's some big names here. We get Mike Riley, the old Pac-12 coach there at Oregon State and the New Jersey Generals. We get Bart Andrus there at the Stars. Larry Fedora, what a great bet he was at Southern Miss there in Conference USA, Robbie. I know you remember that. He's the head coach for the New Orleans Breakers. Of course, it didn't work out for him at UNC, but we'll see if he can bounce back here in the USFL. We get Kirby Wilson with the Maulers. Skip Holtz. Wow, Skip Holtz. Talk about a good, Louisiana Tech run that he had in Conference USA. With the Stallions, we get Kevin Sumlin. Remember Kevin Sumlin there with Texas A&M, also Arizona with the Houston Gamblers. And Jeff Fischer, big name as well, longtime NFL head coach. He's on the Michigan Panthers. So, Robbie, some big name head coaches here in the USFL, kind of catching people's eyeballs. What are your overall thoughts here in terms of coaching staffs in the new league?
Yeah, real quick, Drew, only because I was around for the first league, so I'm old enough to have flashbacks. You said the Tampa Bay Bandits, and immediately, the head coach of that team was Steve Spurrier. The New Orleans Breakers originally were the Boston Breakers, or they moved to Boston. I think there were two home cities for that team. One folded and the other, or they just switched cities. And the Michigan Panthers, Anthony Carter, star wide receiver on that team, went on to have a really good NFL career. Johnny Detroit will know Anthony Carter as a Michigan wide receiver. But, when you travel down through the offensive and defensive coordinators, Drew, you see a lot of names that you know as well. And, I think you and I both have a special place for Larry Fedora, but he teams up with Noel Mazzone. Obviously been an offensive coordinator at the college level for a long, long time, with a lot of time with Kevin Sumlin. Surprising that he's not teamed up with Kevin Sumlin. He's here with Fedora. John Tenuta, when I saw his name, immediately Georgia Tech flashed through my head, but you have to go back about 12, 13 years to find John Tenuta with Georgia Tech. He's had a lot of stops since then. So it is an interesting array of coaches, plenty of them with an awful lot of experience. I think that there's one coaching staff in here that's very, very difficult to find some information on. So you have to dig there. But, these guys have all had pretty good careers, whether it be NFL or college football. It's hard to tell who might stand out in this league, Drew. I'll say this, just from a personal standpoint. I'm anti-Jeff Fischer. So it doesn't mean I'll never bet on the Michigan team. But Jeff Fischer without Steve McNair is a sub-500 NFL head coach. I mean, when he had Steve McNair, he was great. When he didn't have Steve McNair, he was lousy. And you go through some of the coaching careers of these guys, you can pull some numbers. I think that if you're looking for creativity, which I think this league is looking for, a team like New Orleans with Larry Fedora probably gets to be a little creative. And then, not to harp on this too much, but when you go down rosters, I know talking off air, Adam had mentioned how a bunch of guys on Philadelphia played together in a previous spring league. A lot of these coaches drafted players they were familiar with in college. So you get a little continuity there as well. One real quick touch back on rules changes, Drew. You talked about kickoffs and the certain rules that go with kickoffs. Most of those are designed, especially the one where you stand 1 yard off the line of scrimmage. That's to prevent guys from getting a running head start downfield. It's to hopefully get more kickoff returns rather than the boring kick it out of the end zone that we see in the NFL. With a flat-footed start, it's harder to get downfield quick. Starting from the 25 makes it a little, or kicking from the 25 makes it a little more difficult to put it out of the end zone. So they're looking for excitement that way too. So special teams in this league, if you got a good kick returner, probably comes into play as well.
Good points there, Robbie. And Tony, coming to you next, talking about the coaches here, I thought Robbie brought up a great point in terms of continuity from college. These coaches kind of gravitating towards the kids that already kind of know their system, in on the system, and talk about betting early on in the season. I want a quarterback that feels comfortable in the system he's running. There's not a terrible amount of offensive practices here. And I think that's a big thing, kind of a bet on if you can match up, coaches with a bunch of players that already know the system. So I thought that was a great point by Rob. But Tony, any quick thoughts you want to throw out about the coaching staffs?
Well, we can make a joke about Jeff Fischer potentially finishing 5-5 here, considering he's a king of 8-8 and 7-9 when he doesn't have Steve McNair with him. I think from a coaching standpoint, we've got the Tampa Bay Bandits have Todd Haley, who's a proven NFL head coach running the show. Pepper Johnson, longtime NFL defensive lineman and defensive line coach, is their defensive coordinator. Skip Holtz just got fired at Louisiana Tech, so he's definitely got reps down. I look for his team to be well prepared. John Chavis, longtime SEC defensive coordinator, will be running the defense for him. Bob Diaco is going to run the defense for the New Jersey Generals. He's been at Notre Dame and other stops. So yeah, some big names on the coaching stand. You could also make a joke that Kevin Sumlin can't recruit his own team, so he's going to not have a great time coaching it up, considering he hasn't been much of a coach and more of a recruiter. But yeah, look, we're looking to see, first of all, who's best prepared in week one, because that'll tell us a lot about what kind of thumbprint these coaching staffs have been able to get on their rosters right out of the gate. And then who's interested from week to week, who is making the right calls from a strategical standpoint, who's got their teams ready to play, because a lot of this with talent that is not quite at the NFL level, but should be watchable, will be all about pushing the right buttons. So certainly, I think from what Rob is doing, what I'm doing, I'm sure Trig is looking at this too, looking to see what coaches you respect and what your expectations are based on that. That's going to go a long way, especially early in handicapping a league like this, where we're all coming in rather blind.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see like how NFL, like Jeff Fischer, how they do compared to more of the college guys. What is the advantage? To tell you the truth, I'm not really sure. Off the top of my head, I would say more college, but to tell you the truth, that might be wrong. It might be more of an NFL background does well in this league. Trig, any quick thoughts here on the coaching staffs?
Yeah, I mean, so coaching staffs are not going to make a huge difference to me, like early on, so much that, like, for example, I mean, I think Bart Andrews could be the best coach in the league because he's been coaching in the spring league. So he's been coaching in this like developmental version of a league. The spring league folded after last year because of the USFL was coming into sort of play. So he might very well be the best coach in the league because he's been coaching at this sort of level, whereas these other guys are going to have to get acclimated to coaching, like, not in college or professionally, but not really, kind of like a lower version of pro football. So there might be more of an adjustment period for the bigger names than someone like Andrews, who's been coaching at these lower levels for years. I'm going to be looking at quarterback play. I mean, I think the best way to handicap this early on is going to be similar to preseason football. I think we're going to see a lot of not so great football early on, kind of similar to XFL, where those first few games, I mean, some of them were tough watches potentially. I mean, you had, the offense wasn't very good, which lends itself to think, every single one of these totals got hit on the open. I mean, some of them moved as far as 10 points from like low 50s to low 40s, and those moves might not have been enough. So, I look when I cap NFL preseason, I like to look at like, okay, if the offense is going to be, suspect, who's got a mobile quarterback that can kind of make plays on the fly? Well, maybe that's Tiamu on Tampa Bay, right? Kyle Sloter for New Orleans was a assassin in the preseason. If you go back and look at those Vikings preseason teams with Mike Zimmer winning every single preseason game, it was almost always Sloter at the end of the game, closing out those games and making plays to win the game. So I'll probably look at quarterback play more, so than like trying to say, oh well, this coach is better than this coach. And like Tony, like the other guys alluded to, I think we'll start to see who's more prepared and who's not. But there's definitely some underlying stuff here that I think can make us money, before we actually get a data sample size on all of these teams.
great points, Trig, in terms of, I didn't even think of that. Bart Andrews already having experience in the lower level kind of professional football leagues. That actually really might be an advantage there. And I second your, in preseason, whether it be, NFL preseason or early on, even in college football, I look for that mobility at the quarterback position as well, especially if they're bringing in a new system. It kind of lets them extend plays. So something I'm going to look for in terms of week one action. And guys, let's get into it. We got the TV slate here. We got the Saturday night game to kind of kick us off, 7:30 Eastern prime time there with the Generals and the Stallions going at it. You can see the lines there, as well as 3 on Sunday, pretty much all day long, 12 noon, 4 and 8 Eastern. So Tony, maybe start off with you. Just kind of, I guess, a quick look here at week one, some of the matchups, maybe sides, totals. We're seeing WagerTalk odds screen up. DraftKings has lines on all of these. I would think the other sports books are going to be up very, very shortly here. Something just to note here, it's all around 3 and it's all in the low 40s totals wise. So what that tells me is they're sticking within, talking about the sports book here being DraftKings, they're not 100% sure. They're just going to stick around these key numbers of 3 and in the low 40s and just kind of roll the dice, see how it goes week one, man. What are your thoughts?
I mean, Ben Holmes was the number 1 pick for the New Jersey Generals. So when you talk about things not going to plan, he's already been cut. So New Jersey is going to go, I think, with Luis Perez as their quarterback. They've got DeAndre Johnson on the roster. A lot of viewers might be familiar with him because he was a quarterback at Florida Atlantic for a while. And they'll be going up against the Stallions, whose quarterback's going to be Alex Magoo, who was a quarterback at Florida International. So a little South Florida vibe there. I like the preparation wise. I like the coaching staff of the Stallions, so I'm kind of leaning towards Birmingham. Has nothing to do with the home field advantages. We don't know what that is yet. All we know about Birmingham playing a role in this is that it will house the games at Protective Stadium and Legion Field, and then there will be a lot of commercials for their tourism bureau on every broadcast. So get ready to hear a lot about Beham. But again, John Chavis running the defense. You figure that they'll be aggressive. Skip Holtz will be calling the plays, and Magoo's an accomplished quarterback in terms of being on NFL camps week in and week out. So maybe a lean there. The New Jersey Generals are probably the biggest name in this league, just from a familiarity standpoint, because they played such a huge role in the original USFL. But Birmingham Stallions are favored. I don't think that I'll be laying points early on, but I still have to see. And one thing we can't lose sight of, this is still football. It's still one in the trenches. You're still going to want to see what team can get to a quarterback fastest, what team can protect the quarterback best. And that's ultimately what's going to make the difference here.
Yeah, good point. Watch that line play, guys. And Tony talking about Magoo there for FIU. I think that was the last time FIU was in a bowl game. Their program really fell off since he went into the Seattle Seahawks team, I believe. He played some preseason games there. Rob, what are your thoughts here? Week one, Saturday night, all the way through Sunday night, man.
Yeah, it's interesting, Drew. A couple of things. I just want to step back real quick to when we're talking about coaching. What's interesting with this league is that every head coach, with the exception of one, the Pittsburgh Maulers, is the actual GM of the squad as well. So they're the guys who made the picks. And these guys that are fresh off of college football, now some of these kids are 27 years old and maybe 4 or 5 years out of college. But there's a real good familiarity with a lot of these college coaches that drafted, and they drafted to their needs. So I think that's something to consider. Pittsburgh was the only team that doesn't have the same GM and head coach. Luis Perez, Tony talked about, underrated quarterback, a guy who did very, very well in the XFL. So watch out for him. I think that he could be troublesome for some opponents. And interesting, Shea Patterson and Jordan Teamu, right? If we get into side stories, Teamu beats Patterson out for the Ole Miss job, which forces Patterson to Michigan. Patterson becomes the number 1 pick in this league when most thought, off of what Jordan Teamu did with the St. Louis Battlehawks in the AAF, they thought he might be that guy. So there's a lot of subplots and side stories, but I'll say this. Coaching, to Adam's point, may not be the be-all, end-all. But I think coaching familiarity is. And when you're trying to anticipate, because again, they're not giving away a lot of secrets, Drew, as to what these systems and schemes are going to be here. I've dug for the better part of 3 weeks now. So you have to go off of track records of what these guys like to do. Kevin Sumlin has teamed himself with offensive coordinator David Beatty. Now, when David Beatty came into college football first about 4 years ago, he was a highly touted high school offensive wizard. I think his high school team put up like 50 some odd points a game. In the end, he wound up in Kansas, where they ran a bunch of wide open offense. Kansas just didn't have the personnel. He became an analyst, I think, for Texas under Tom Herman, the head coach there. But that pairing there suggests to me that we're going to see a lot of open field stuff from the offense of the Houston Gamblers, as well as I mentioned it before, the New Orleans team, that combination of Larry Fedora and Noah Bazone. They both come from the same spread background. So I think those teams, maybe you see a little bit more open offense. Teams like Jeff Fischer, who likes to hand the ball off, probably see a little more defense. One last point I'll make about this league is that the draft was unique in the fact that it was staggered. Like they I don't know how they got the draw, but however they got the draw, they picked quarterbacks first, and Michigan got the number one pick of quarterbacks. Okay, then they moved on to defensive ends. Somebody was just talking about pass rush and defensive line play. Well, the New Orleans Breakers were the first team to pick out of the litter of defensive ends and probably got the best down lineman in the draft. So the way this was staggered, then it went on to defensive backs and offensive linemen, and everybody got a turn going first, or at least moving up in the draft order. So, you probably find teams that are a little bit better in one area than they are in other areas due to where they drafted. New Orleans maybe being the exception to that rule, because they got stuck with the 8th pick, the very last pick at quarterback, and they ended up, as Adam mentioned, with Kyle Sloter, who I think is going to be a star in this league. So for me, I like the New Orleans Breakers. Without talking about individual games here, I will say that this whole league is a crapshoot, and I think I got 5-1 on the Breakers to win the whole thing. So the league being what it is a crapshoot, I took a shot 5-1 with them. I think the Pittsburgh Maulers might be a sneaky good team based on offensive talent. And again, if you watch enough college football, you learn to know a lot of these names so you can decipher what may happen from there. But you talked earlier about not a lot of practices, Drew, and continuity probably at a minimum here, game one for these teams.
Yeah, it makes me look towards the under, thinking that is in mind. But we've seen a huge push here, and they're already in the low 40s. But Trig, we were talking a little bit off camera about it being in Birmingham. I lived in the state of Alabama for 5 years. Huge football, state. They love college football, love pro football. They don't really have one until I guess Saturday night. And a huge high school football state, man. You go to some of those high school football games; they're packed out, bands playing. It's a really good time as well. So I actually think this league has success, in terms of like stock value. This one actually might stick around, especially if some of these rules are really exciting to kind of the general fan out there. But Trig, interested in your thoughts just on how the league does in week one here, man. You got your eye, you circling one of these matchups?
Well, just to answer your first question, Drew, I think having the whole league start in Birmingham is really smart. It reminds me of like what WWE did with like NXT and having it just in Florida, and then having like a little bit of like a cult following down there. That might happen with this league, because every game is either at Legion Field or Protective Field, and they're gonna, you're not gonna, if you're down in the Birmingham area, you can go see any matchup, and you might have some kind of diehard USFL fans that just keep showing up at each game. Matchup wise, week one, it's actually a tough slate. I have pretty strong opinions. Unfortunately, a lot of these teams are not paired up the way I wanted them to be. For example, I think the two worst teams in the league are the two that are playing in the primetime debut game. I don't know if, I know they obviously wanted Birmingham, being as though it's in Birmingham, but I kind of have New Jersey, or the Generals and the Stallions, toward the bottom of the league, just from, the research I've done. And I agree with Rob. New Orleans is going to be really good. Kyle Sloter is awesome, but Philadelphia should be really good as well because I like the continuity aspect with the Stars. Bart Andrews, head coach, has been coaching a lot of these guys in what was called the spring league or at the lower levels, and they're going to definitely come in with some value with no one really know. I think the knee jerk reaction from the betting public here is going to be to look at for the names they recognize. And that's not necessarily going to work in handicapping. I actually think it might work to your detriment if you're looking at the Michigan Panthers because they got the first pick and they took Shea Patterson, which I don't think was the best option on the board. He actually might not be the best quarterback on that team because Paxton Lynch is on that team. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Paxton Lynch beat him out for that job. If anything, Paxton Lynch has probably a better pro pedigree than Shea Patterson does. So we'll see there. But unfortunately, fading them might be tough in week one because I am not high on the Houston Gamblers at all. I think that might be one of the least impressive rosters, at least on paper, and that I've seen so far. So, the other game, the Tampa Bay team was another interesting one that I looked from like a bet to win it all type deal. They were right in that 5-1 range, but almost all these teams on the futures, like I think you could have got 5 or 6-1 on just about every team. You were talking about the books not wanting to take a stand on some of the lines. Well, they didn't take a stand in the futures market either because like I'm pretty sure every team to win the league opened either 5-1, 6-1, or like 7-1. So pretty much very parity across the board. And then the other team I didn't touch on, the Maulers. Rob, I can't remember if we talked about this off air or on air, but he said, oh, they could kind of be a sleeper, and I kind of agree with him. That might be a sneaky team just because they maybe don't have some of the names, but they have an interesting outlook and some depth on their roster as well, where they look kind of like a team that could grind out some results in this league and might be undervalued. So I just ran through the 4 matchups. I've got one that I do like quite a bit. I've already posted it. I don't know if I'll get to the window with anything else week one, but I can guarantee you we're going to have overreaction week 2 in the USFL, just like we do in the NFL. So I can't wait for that.
Yeah, good point there, Trig. And guys, watching on replay, feel free to reply below on the WagerTalk YouTube channel where you agree with us, where you disagree. It's all welcome. If you got any picks for week 1, maybe a future here in the USFL, throw it out there in the reply section. Huge shout out to the chat box, everybody joining us live. We'll be doing this each week before the weekend games, kind of taking a look here, giving out any action we got. And guys, the plays at wagertalk.com discounted here for USFL will be a discount off of the normally priced packages from Tony Mejia, Rob Veno, Adam Trigger, and myself, Drew Martin. All excited about football here, guys. Just going around the horn, we are up against it time-wise, guys. But for final thoughts, if you got a best bet, feel free to throw it out there. Who you think the winner of the league's going to be, anything like that, as I run it down to Trig's points. One of the global books out there has Birmingham at plus 800, and at the top, Michigan Panthers now bet down to plus 375. But pretty much after that, everybody's in between 800 and 500, followed by the Tampa Bay Bandits at plus 500, before the New Orleans Breakers at plus 600. Then Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Houston right there around plus 700 in terms of the futures to win the USFL. So going around the horn here, if you got a best bet, feel free to throw it out. How you think the league does overall, business-wise, it is all welcome here, guys. Tony Mejia, give him a follow on Twitter. Also, wagertalk.com. He's a guy that, if you like volume, he's probably your guy. So check him out. And Tony, final thoughts here for the USFL video.
I think Jordan Ta'amu is going to be the best quarterback in this league. I like that partnership that they've got with Todd Haley going on. Haley will be calling plays. So I think Tampa Bay Bandits will do really well. We'll see about week 1 because we want to see whether he's going to be protected or not and how the weather's going to play out. Because like I mentioned, there will be thunderstorms in the current forecast in the Birmingham area on Sunday night. But, if there's going to be, if you ask me who's going to be the Kurt Warner of this USFL, I think it's Ta'amu. And we will see how he fares. Did a nice job in the XFL before that league was cut short. And he was on 4 practice squads last year, the Chiefs, the Lions, Washington, and Carolina. So certainly should be prepared. Catching on with the Chiefs early on, I think his tenure only ended because he caught COVID. So this is a talented kid. Everybody's seen him over the past few years, considering he was a big member of an SEC team. So I look for him to do big things, and I'm encouraged about his partnership with Haley. We'll see whether it comes to fruition.
Yeah, interesting kind of subplot there with the Ole Miss former quarterbacks, Shea Patterson and Jordan Tamu, both quarterbacks here in the USFL, and he gives you mobility at the quarterback position. A guy I would actually look to bet on week one, and he had a lot of success playing in the SEC, also making a couple squads there in the NFL. Guys, some final thoughts from me. First off, I think it's very important in these new leagues with new rules. Nobody really knows what's going on, including the odds makers here. I think they're telling us that with the sides and totals all in the same realm, is be quick on your feet. Don't what I'm telling myself is making my notes to myself after watching week one, feel free to kind of throw out what you thought preseason. Be quick in that instead of like college basketball or say college football, where you might get more kind of preseason known research and you might want to kind of go back for overreaction. I'm actually week two going to be ready to rock in terms of getting after the opening markets in teams that were going really up tempo. Maybe look to bet them over, teams where their defense looked really good. I thought a couple good points in terms of watching these defensive lines. If they're getting huge pushes against the opposing offensive line, that is a big bet on for me, because that's something as an offense, you sometimes just in the sport of football, no matter what level, high school up to the NFL, if you can't stop their defensive line, you're in a lot of trouble. So that's one of the matchups I would really circle to watch. Really excited about the league overall. I think this one has a shot to work for like multiple years here. I like the rules changes, but Robbie Veno, a guy that knows a lot about football, check him out, WagerTalk.com. We got the discounted packages for USFL. He'll have a play up, I'm sure. But Robbie, kind of final thoughts here for the video before we shut it down.
I think real quick, Drew, you want to see if the city of Birmingham attaches itself to their team, and if the stands are filled with Birmingham fans. That could be a huge advantage this year if, in fact, that city attaches itself to that team. They're certainly not going to attach themselves to the Michigan Panthers or the New Jersey Generals or the Pittsburgh Maulers or Philadelphia Stars. So that's one thing to look for here. They're owned by Fox, to your point, so maybe this thing works. The cut and cost that you mentioned. And I think that, again, I'll just say that for this show's purposes, New Orleans Breakers, to me, were the best bet on the futures board, aside from the fact that I mentioned they had the top pick of the litter for defensive linemen. When you start with names, Drew, we've already mentioned Kyle Sloter enough, but at running back, Larry Fedora gets his own TJ Logan. Larry Rose III, a guy we're familiar with from New Mexico State, but the receiving core has size and speed. Tawan Taylor was a receiver with the Tennessee Titans very, very recently. Johnny Dixon, a speedster from Ohio State, Sean Poindexter. Most, people that are following the USFL, will tell you that those three guys are within the top 15 of receivers in the entire league. So a good defensive line with offensive capability led by Larry Fedora, Noah Mazzone. Give me a future bet on New Orleans plus the price.
I like it, Robbie. Seeing them plus 600 at a prominent global shop right now. So if you like futures here, guys, big plus price, risk 100 to win 600 on the New Orleans squad. Trig, man, finish us off. Final thoughts. If you got a best bet, throw it out there, bud.
Well, I have a thought now that you said that Michigan's been bet down that far. I kind of want to call our friends at the Westgate or Circa and see if they'll give me a no on Michigan not to win the whole thing. Because I don't think that they're even the fourth best team in this league. And I can't believe, maybe they're the fourth best team in this league. They're certainly not 1, 2, or 3. And I can't believe their odds have drifted that low on them to win the whole thing. So just I guess a general thought, Michigan's probably a team I'm going to look to fade. I don't know if I'll do it this weekend because I'm not super high on Houston, but they're a team that I'm looking to fade. And Drew, I agree with you. You got to be willing to, no one knows that much about what these teams are going to do in a real game situation. So you've really got to be willing to, take your preseason projections and make wholesale changes if that's sort of what the gameplay dictates. Now, one thing I'll say from a handicapping perspective, don't worry about the final scores as much as like what goes on in the games. If I see a team that got beat, but they got beat because they made 4 really careless, stupid turnovers. That might be a team where I might be willing to come back and say, okay, they lost, but maybe they can clean this up a little bit and be better the next time out. But, just going back to the AAF and the XFL, if you've got teams that are just not moving the ball, we saw that be a thing from week to week in the AAF and the XFL recently, where there would be 2-3 weeks of just like futility for some of these teams until they really made a change. The one that comes to mind was whatever team Aaron Murray was on, where they just could not figure out how to move the ball. And then, to Rob's point, the Birmingham Iron were the AAF team that played at Legion Field. And from memory, I think they got a pretty good turnout in relation to the rest of that league for their games. I don't know if we could go back and figure that out, but I remember those games, and I remember Birmingham being one of the better atmospheres for the games in that league. So who knows? Maybe they do show up and support the Birmingham Stallions, giving them a little bit of a home field advantage. So best bet, like I said, I've got a bet that I really love based on on my preseason research that's up on my page. But I think you can, Michigan Panthers. I would not be playing on them, and I certainly wouldn't be laying points on them. So a slight lean toward the Gamblers plus the points, but maybe keep that in your back pocket for when you have a better team up against Michigan as a favorite. I think Michigan Panthers could be the disappointment of this league this year.
He's Adam Trigger. We heard from Robbie Veno, Tony Mejia as well. I am Drew Martin. Guys, check us all out at WagerTalk.com and right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel, USFL, starting Saturday night. Best of luck if you're out there betting it. Please smash that like button if you like the content, and feel free to reply below. Let us know if you're liking the video, where you agree, where you disagree. So, guys, best of luck with your bets. USFL next week. Come back and join us. Thanks for tuning in.